Hey everyone, this is David Pike, the MotorCity mechanic. Now in today's video, I want to show you step by step how to remove the transmission solenoid pack on a Chrysler 62 TE. That's the common 6-speed front-wheel drive transaxle. Now the transmission that we're going to be using in today's video is a Chrysler 62 TE. It's a 6-speed front-wheel drive transaxle. And there's two common vehicles that you'll find this one in. First one being the Dodge Grand Caravan and the other one being the Dodge Journey. That doesn't mean that it doesn't come in other vehicles, but again, those are the two more common. Now, the easiest way to see what transmission you have, and if it is this one, is you open the hood and you look for the electrical connector on the side of this transmission pan. And the second thing is, look for the dipstick tube and you'll see that there's a cap with no dipstick. So that means there's a special procedure for adjusting the fluid. Those are the two more common characteristics as far as visually seeing what's the difference between this and other transaxles. Now there's one important thing I want to touch on real quick before we jump into removing that solenoid pack. And that is, when was the last time you changed the trans fluid in your transmission or the filter? If it's been over 60,000 miles, this would be the perfect time to do it. Now there's two pans on this transaxle. The one on the side here where the valve body and solenoid pack is, and then the lower one where the filter and the fluid is. We don't have to remove that lower one when we're doing the solenoid pack, but then again it helps. So what better thing to do than to add a new filter and fluid so we don't have to worry about any kind of shift quality issues. At that point we've kind of freshened things up. We've got the new fluid, we've got the new solenoid pack in, so that way we don't have to worry about any issues further down the line. Keep up on your maintenance. Again, if it's been 60,000 miles or more, let's go ahead and tackle that at the same time that we're doing this solenoid pack. Now in order to get to the solenoid pack, we got to work on removing the side transmission pan. It's the one that's got the dipstick tube and the electrical connector going through it. Now there may be a couple things that kind of get in the way of removing it. Obviously from looking at it right now, you can see that the trans lines are positioned in such a way that it goes over the pan. Now previously I did a video on removing these trans lines. I'm going to put the link up here in the corner. Make sure to click and watch it. And I show you how to release the spring-loaded quick connects without any special tools. Now the other thing you may come across is, depending on the engine that's bolted to the transaxle, there may be a section of exhaust that goes right here. That section of exhaust is going to prevent you from getting to some of the fasteners and for lifting up and removing the trans pan. Now if you have that kind of setup, you're probably going to fight with the exhaust flange nuts and bolts, and you're going to need to replace the gaskets on both ends. Luckily for us, we don't have that issue, so at this point we'll work on going ahead and getting to the pan and this little protective cover or sound deadening material that's on top of it. So now that we've repositioned the trans lines and got them out of the way, you've got a better view of this side pan that we're going to be working with. Now you can't see all the fasteners right now because there's an insulated cover. Now yours may or may not have this cover on it, and if it doesn't, more than likely whoever worked on it last didn't reinstall it. Now we got a bracket over here we're going to be taking off. Once we get that out of the way, we're going to deal with this insulated cover. Now typically it's held in place with some little metal washers with little teeth on it. They slide over 3 studs around the perimeter, but when you go to remove it, you're going to damage or have to cut them off, so you cannot reuse those. But all you need is some washers and some nuts, and you can just thread it down on the studs that are exposed, and that will hold it in place. But for now, we're going to deal with this bracket. Now being that this transmission comes in a lot of different vehicles, you may or may not have a bracket in this location. You may have one somewhere else, maybe up above. Nonetheless, the bracket has to come off so we can get to this insulated cover to remove it. Now all we got to do is back off this 10mm bolt. Now I've used this transmission in a previous video, so obviously this cover's been off before, so I don't have those little washers to show you, but instead I've got 3 10mm nuts and washers that you need to remove. We've got one located right here, got one down here in the corner, and then we got one down here in this corner. So once we get those off, this insulated cover is getting moved out of the way. At that point we just need to slide it off. We're going to lift up past that dipstick tube. Now that we've got the insulated cover removed, you can see all the fasteners around the perimeter of that trans pan. Now we already talked about the 3 studded bolts. Now those are 10 millimeter. So you remove those, and then we got a series of 10 8 millimeter bolts around the rest of the perimeter we've got to take off. Now the trans pan is sealed to the transmission using RTV. So it means the pan's not just going to come off. So we actually got to work something down in between to kind of break the seal. So what I like to use is just a flat putty knife, something like this. Just get a hammer, get a corner, and just start tapping. Don't go too far in there because remember we do got a valve body that's in there. Just tap around the perimeter. Just keep repositioning it and working it around. Eventually you'll get enough of it broke loose, just like that. So now that the trans pan is no longer sealed to the transmission, we can go ahead and pull it off. Now you need to pay attention to a couple things. Obviously we got the electrical connect right here, so we got to move the pan this way. On some vehicles, this portion of the dipstick tube, that's part of the pan, goes further into the transaxle. So you may have to pull forward and go up. Luckily for this one, it's got a shortened tube on it. Look on the back side, you can see exactly what I was talking about. Remember, some of these will be longer and they will actually reach down in here. Now with the pan removed, now you got a close-up view of what we're after here, this solenoid pack. Now in a perfect, easy world, we just back off some fasteners, pull it off, reinstall the new one. But unfortunately, that's not the case. The fasteners for the solenoid pack are on the back side of the valve body. So it means that this valve body right here has to be removed in order to replace this solenoid pack. So that's what we're going to tackle next. Don't look at these fasteners around the perimeter here and think, oh, all I got to do is back those off. It's not going to help you. It's just going to separate portions of the solenoid pack, and it's still not going to unbolt it from the valve body. Again, we've got to take the valve body off in order to remove the solenoid pack. Now one of the first things we got to work on removing is this detent right here. Now the detent is what gives you that positive engagement when you're shifting through the gears. If you're in park, reverse, neutral, drive, when you feel it's in a gear, that's what that detent is. It's got a roller on it and it rides over basically what looks like a rooster tail. As it goes in each position, that roller goes in there and stays in there. That's got to be unbolted. Now there's a Torx bolt right here we got to take off, and that's a T25. Again, we got a T25 we've got to remove there. If you look real close, you'll see that roller I was just talking about. And the next thing we're going to deal with is the electrical connector for the trans range sensor. Now when we go to remove this white connector from the trans range sensor, we need to make sure we take care and we don't break off this lock right here. I'm going to use a flat tip screwdriver, get up under the edge just enough. I'm going to wiggle the connector off. So now we've got the range sensor unplugged. Now for now, that's all the electrical connectors that we've got to disconnect. We'll fight with some of the other ones once we've got the valve body off. So at this point, we're ready to go ahead and unbolt the valve body from the transmission case. And we've got a number of 7mm bolts. Matter of fact, 21 of them we've got to take loose all the way around the perimeter. 21 7mm bolts. So now that we've removed all those 7mm bolts, we're just about ready to remove the valve body, except we've got two more things we've got to deal with. We've got a connection tube that goes from the valve body to the compounder assembly. Now the compounder assembly basically is 5th and 6th gear, and there are no drilled passages that go from the valve body through the case to it. Instead, they use 3 pipes with some O-rings on both ends, and it just basically slides inside the valve body and on the other end inside the compounder. That has a tendency to want to stick in one of the two. So when we start working the valve body loose, we're going to have to grab something to kind of work the tubes off. Another thing is, we've got a valve with a pin that goes through the range sensor here. We got to pay attention to that when we come up so we don't damage it. Basically all we're going to be doing at that point is lifting up and clearing. But again, it's something you need to pay attention to. Now the valve body seals itself to the transmission case with a gasket, so it may cause the valve body to kind of stick in place. So what you need to do is find an edge that we're not using for anything that's not important. We're just going to gently kind of break it loose. And we'll kind of work around the perimeter and we'll get down there where those pipes are that I was talking about. So if you look at the bottom right corner of the valve body, just behind it there's a piece of rubber. That rubber is where those 3 tubes come through, and the rubber kind of separates them, kind of helps guide it when we're going through there as far as positioning with the side of the case and the valve body. And again, we need to kind of work on getting it up, so we can actually work on getting the pipes off. As we come up, you can see that rubber piece a little bit better. Now once I've got the valve body pulled away a little bit, what I can do at this point is start pushing that piece of rubber down. And the best way to do that is some long needle nose right here. Reach up in there, kind of just pry it out of the way, because we want access to the pipes. Now there's more than one way to do this, but the reason why I'm kind of fighting with these pipes is I don't want to have to worry about this trans range sensor and having to worry about taking it off. It's a little bit more difficult. If we can actually get the pipes out, we'll save a lot of time. Now if you look real close, you can see the 3 tubes that I just mentioned. Now if you wiggle it, you can actually see how one of them is actually somewhat loose already. What I like to do is I grab some needle nose pliers once again, and I kind of grab the tube, kind of squeeze, and I kind of try to work it out of there. Now you got to kind of go back and forth because again you're fighting with 3 of them. Up one's freed, you gotta work on the next 2. This is just a part where you need to take your time. Don't be in a hurry. As long as you do what I say, you will get them loose. Now remember, we gotta watch out for this detent pin down here. That's part of this valve going into that range sensor. We've got the pipes released. Now we're just gonna lift up and we can set the valve body off to the side. Now that we've got the valve body out of the way, you can clearly see the 3 pipes that we were just fighting with. Now that black rubber piece that we pushed down, I told you it was a spacer basically. It keeps everything organized and separated to a specific distance. It doesn't allow the 3 pipes to go up and down too far or go left to right. And also it keeps them separated so when we put the valve body back on, it's a whole lot easier to line things up. Now if you look real close, you'll see that color blue. Now those blue things are O-rings, and they recommend replacing them when you pull the valve body off. Now I've done them in the past where I didn't replace them. I didn't have any problems, but just to be safe so you don't have to do this over and over again, go ahead and get you 3 of those O-rings. Now if the pipes came out, you've got the exact same thing on the back side. 3 more O-rings. So again, you may actually want to order 6 of them. Just depends on how much you had to fight to get these things out. And when you go back with it, all you got to do is just kind of guide it down in there. And at that point, just press. Fully seated. It's easy enough to reinstall, and then again, like I said, you may want to replace these O-rings. So now that we've got the valve body out of the transmission, let's go ahead and talk about some important details related to this valve body. Obviously, we already know that's the solenoid pack. That's what we're here for, right? Now we've got 2 electrical connectors that we're going to have to unplug. If you look over here, we've got a black connector with a red lock on it. It's a 2-stage lock. That's fairly easy to remove. We'll talk about that once we get to it. The connector you need to really worry about is the one right here on this solenoid. It's white in color. It doesn't matter how careful you are, you're going to try to pry the lock out of the way. It's kind of like a tang. You have to slide it to try to pull the connector up. And I'm telling you, 90% of the time it breaks. And the only way to fix that is to either replace the solenoid or get a couple small wire ties and rig something up. Something that's going to hold and it's not going to affect anything. Now, we talked about the solenoid pack being bolted from the backside. These fasteners up here have nothing to do with removing it. Now, if we flip it over, you'll see this aluminum piece right here. You also see the gasket around the perimeter. It's actually one solid piece that this is sandwiched on top of. All the fasteners related to the solenoid pack go through this aluminum piece. So that's the ones we'll be taking off. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on getting to these fasteners and try to get that solenoid pack off after we get those 2 connectors disconnected. So let's go ahead and deal with that easier of the two connectors. Remember I said it's two-stage. What that means is we got one piece that we've got to slide up. Once we release that, we need to squeeze. When we squeeze, it releases the other part of the lock for the connector. Got that unplugged. Now we're going to deal with the one that I hate the most. So now we're ready to tackle or try to tackle the dreaded white lock on that solenoid. You can't really see it too well because where it's positioned, it's back here up against the solenoid pack. Now what you're going to do is just grab you something small like a flat tip screwdriver. We're going to kind of get between the connector and the lock. And again, we've got to push or pry it out of the way. At the same time, I'm going to grab these two wires and I'm going to start wiggling. Now I want to kind of pull them towards the solenoid to kind of give me a little bit of benefit as far as not having to pry it too far. And luckily, we didn't break it. It's still there. It's still intact. You can see right there, that's the piece we'd actually be prying in and out. We lucked out. I'm telling you, they will break a lot, and it's going to become something you need to pay very close attention to. And again, like I said, you can use a series of wire ties. You can kind of run them through the wires right here, find a way to kind of go around the perimeter. You can rig things up to make this stay locked in place. I hate for you to have to buy a solenoid, so take your time, and hopefully it works out well like it did on this one. So now we've got those connectors disconnected. We're just going to flip it over. We're going to get to the back side. So now we can start working on these fasteners so we can get that solenoid pack separated. Now the fasteners that hold the solenoid pack to this aluminum plate are Torx, and they're T25 and there's 14 of them. Now a little quick tip here. Once you've got the fasteners backed off, they're kind of down these little recessed holes here. Grab your little magnet and use that for pulling them out. So now we've got all the fasteners removed. We're ready to go ahead and flip it over and remove the solenoid pack. Now what I like to do at this point is just squeeze on it and hold all of it together, because that solenoid pack is loose. And we'll sit it down. Then we can just grab it, pick it up. Now it's got some alignment dowels that keeps it in a specific place, so you don't have to worry about lining things up. It also has a gasket or seal area right here that's got a little white O-ring surface. That's what seals it to the plate. Now and that brings us to the end of part one of this series. There's a lot of information, so I had to break it up into more than one video. Now at the end of this particular video, you'll see a thumbnail for part two, so make sure to click on it and watch it. Now if you liked the video, please give it a big thumbs up on YouTube. Don't forget you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you got any comments or suggestions about what you've seen so far in this video, or anything Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram, you can leave something in the comments below, or you can email me at david@motorcitymechanic.com. Also, if you'd like to shop on Amazon, please scroll down into the description below this video, and there is a link. Click on that link and make that your Amazon homepage. And anytime you buy anything, it will help support this channel. Once again, everybody, thanks for watching.